Good morning, all of you. It's a privilege to be here in Rhodes, and it's a privilege to be a former political leader, because as the disorder seems to be a supreme feature of the present situation, we are very much confronted with a lot of nostalgia, which means that many people think that the old days have been better than the present, which very often leads to the conclusion that the former political leaders are much better than the present ones, which in a way is quite gratifying for those that are out of office and quite challenging for those that take responsibility today. Even if I enjoy that privilege, I tend to disagree with that assessment. When we are talking about a world of disorder, and when we try to portray that this seems to be a very singular situation or moment in the history of mankind, I, quite the contrary, would say disorder has been the major characteristic of the history of the world throughout all the centuries. And situations of order are quite the exception in the history of mankind. And even if we experienced periods of order, they were order for many, but not for all. And even in the times of the bipolar world, that while exercising a hegemony over the East and the West, looks to be a quite peaceful period for many people. Even in that period, after the Second World War, there was a lot of individual disorder. There was a lot of oppression. And there were many, many, many wars all around the world. So even the days that are now assessed as the decades of order haven't been a satisfactory order for millions and millions of people around the world. So if we are talking about the present disorder, I would say welcome back to normality, because the normality of the world is disorder. Why is the present disorder so much frightening for many? It is the result of multiple and simultaneously taking place transformations of the world in many aspects. It's a transformation that goes from a unipolar world where we had one superpower to a new situation that might be a multipolar world, or even a world without strong polars, or a world with one stronger pole and a multiple of other poles. We are in a transformation from a situation that is mainly characterized by states to a situation where non-state actors, from positive ones like civil society to negative ones like terrorist groups, are gaining more and more space. We are in a transformation where power is challenged on different levels by the politicization of different religions, by the re-emergence of nationalism, by a new aggressivity in the defense of interests, and by the tendency of a dissolution of states that are not the natural result of historic developments, but of state borders that have been artificially drawn by colonial forces in the past. And we are also in a transformation of an economy that lately was called financial capitalism to whatever new form of economy where growth will not emerge from the ever-enhancing cycles of financial capitalism, but an economy that might be based in future again more on the real economic developments of industry, agriculture, research, innovation, and development. And we are in a transformation of societies where we have the parallelity of more aggressive nationalist feelings, which are in a way collective behaviors that define themselves in contrast to others. And this collective behavior is accompanied by a very specific type of individualism that is not emerging from the human rights perspective of unavoidable and inevitable human rights, but of a certain exacerbation of egoistic interests. So individualism, not defined as a higher status of individual freedom as part of a society that is acting on basis of agreed rules, but trying to establish a rule where the exacerbation of individualism is mainly defined also in contrast and in conflict and at the loss of the interests of other individuals. And I could continue the list of major transformations that we are in right now. And these simultaneous transformations portray a frightening picture to many, many people. And in such a situation, a conversation like the one that we are trying to have here in Rhodes, trying to assess the state that we are in and what might be avenues to get out and to bring at least a little bit more of order to the world, which might result in more peaceful situations, I think is a very adequate and important task. And at least for us living in the center of Europe, we are nowadays very much concerned with the situation in the Middle East, with the situation in Syria, also because some of the results of that conflict are now happening in front of our doorsteps, which is a rather massive flow of migration that is coming from that area to Europe. And therefore, I want to use the opportunity here to share with you some thoughts on the situation there. I think it has been proven wrong that external forces have the right or are able to impose a specific political order on some countries. It has been proven wrong. It was wrong to go to Iraq and eliminate Saddam Hussein and say, after that we are going to see what is going to happen. It was wrong to go to Libya and eliminate Mr. Gaddafi and say, and we are going to see what is going to happen afterwards. And of course we that all happened under the title of the universalization of democracies in some of the countries. And these are not the only examples. And I think it also would be wrong to go now to Syria and to say we have to get rid of the present regime and we are establishing something like democracy and then we will look what is going on. I think history has proven that this is the wrong attitude, especially if we are talking about a country like Syria with artificial borders that have been drawn by colonial powers in the past. And if one wants to give right to all the different ethnic groups in that country, you might have 5 different countries if they are solemnly composed out of a single ethnic group. And each of these possible 5 countries would be not only in conflict with each other, but also allied with the one or the other country in the area, and would fundamentally question the entire map of the Middle East. And therefore, I think being responsible, trying to address the situation there, the most important thing is to achieve a ceasefire, to get the arms to rest, and to sit together and try to initiate a process of negotiations with those that are living there at the spot and with those from outside who could be helpful, that could be helpful. But it would be a mistake that the future plans for Syria are drawn in Washington or in Brussels or in Moscow or in Beijing, and somebody else would go there and try to implement it. No. The people that are living in the area have to come to terms with international support. And I think many of the successful transformations, if you look around the world, haven't been driven by outside. They always have been driven by inside. If you look to the example of the transformation in Poland, from the former communist rule to democracy nowadays, this was based on the initiative of a broad trade union movement, Solidarność, and then administered by a round table where the enlightened forces of all sides were sitting together and drafted a plan of a transformation that I think has been a very successful one. It has not been imposed by outside. It was a development inside the society. And I think we have to respect that the developments have to come from within and that the international community has the task to support that. And of course, it's miserable if you look to many of the refugees who are running for their lives. And of course, we have to give shelter to them in the neighboring countries, but also in Europe. But it would be a complete illusion to believe that wherever conflicts in the world now happen, and wherever thousands and millions of refugees have the natural intention to leave their country, that Europe would be able to solve the situation by all inviting to Europe. This is a very naive, a very romantic, but a completely unrealistic assessment of the situation. Of course, the refugees that come now, if Europe cooperates, they can be hosted. Be they 1.5 or 2 million people, I think there is the capacity to manage them if there is an inner European cooperation. But first of all, not forever. And second, not for all conflicts that are going on in the world. Europe has the individual right of asylum. but only as long as there is the capacity to offer that, and as long as there is a democratic consensus that we are able to help and to assist. And I think we should be very frank about that, not to create any illusions. And we have to combine this right of asylum to come to Europe and to be hosted here with practical measures at the spot where, close to the home of the people, we are establishing security zones with safe shelter where people can stay for the time as the armed conflict is going on, and at the earliest possibility when the situation is settled, can go back to their home country and rebuild what has been so severely destroyed by this very, very cruel war. And I think a certain realism in this debate is necessary if we want that people are going to follow political proposals. To create wrong illusions would only create frustration, it would only create xenophobia, it would only create a new nationalism that is not going to help us. And as we are in Greece, and I know I'm too long, but I have to say that, as we are in Greece and our friends in Greece are struggling, one has to be consistent. Greece, which is on the border of the European Union, recently suffering from some substantial economic problems. Greece was advised to reduce the number of public employees, which might be a way to reduce your budget deficit, and which maybe is possible in some of the arenas of public office. But at the same time, now Greece is the country where all the millions of refugees are coming in. And the present agreement of Schengen and Dublin asks Greece to do the entire administration of the refugees coming in, the registration, etc. By whom should it be done? Of course, by authorized public sector people. So on the one hand, you tell them, reduce your budget, kick out people from the public sector, and at the same time you say, but you have to fulfill your obligations under the Dublin and the Schengen Agreement and do the entire administration of the refugees that are coming in. This is what we classically in Latin call a contradictio in adjecto, which normally cannot be resolved very easily. And therefore, we also have to understand that some of our arrangements that we made, be it Schengen, Dublin, or whatever, are institutional arrangements that have been done for the times of good weather. They have not been drafted for the case of crisis. They have not been drafted for a situation that we have right now, where not 20 or 30 or 100 or 2,000 people are coming, but where millions of people are coming. And to ask the countries with a poorer economy from the European periphery to take up the entire load of administrating this refugee wave without giving them proper support in order to be able to handle that is first not fair, second not credible, and thirdly is creating some of the problems that we are facing right now in Europe. Because all these groups that are earning a lot of money bringing poor people from the Syrian-Turkish border into the centers of Europe, they only can make their money because we are not administrating that adequately. Because normally, if somebody comes to the European Union, is accepted as an asylum seeker and as a refugee, then it would be our duty to bring this person to a safe shelter wherever that is in Europe. We should not take the implicit position that the survival of the fittest, which means those that are able to go all these thousands of kilometers from Turkey to Germany via Austria and some other countries, that only those who can afford that, who can pay all these criminal groups that are earning the money, are the ones that at the end of the day we are taking. No. If we take the right of asylum seriously, within the given limits of our possibilities, then we also should take the responsibility to care about these refugees as soon as we allow them into the European Union and bring them to places where they will find shelter. And I could talk at length on this issue that nowadays is moving and to a certain extent also shaking European societies. But these are the kind of questions which we have to address and to answer if we want to convey a message to our people that says, listen, situation might be difficult, there might be a lot of disorder, but common sense, political responsibility, and cooperation is still possible to resolve these issues in the interest of many. And to make those proposals is one of the tasks that we are going to have to do here in the Rhodes Forum, and this is why I'm pleased to be here with you and to share some of the ideas. Thank you very much.